All right. Good morning, folks. My name is Evelyn Greb. I'm your facilitator today. We have with us Dr. Natalee Oliver, who is going to talk to us about the stigma of caring for someone with dementia, the stigma for the person with the dementia, and the isolation it creates for you as a caregiver. And Dr. Oliver, we're so pleased to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us and for your research and willingness to take your time to help us learn more.
Thank you. Okay, let me pull up the screen. And let's see. I'm trying to put it. I wonder why it's not going to just one slide. Ah, there we go, because I have to click a button. Technology.
Yes. But you don't have a student here.
I know, I need a student to help me. Okay, welcome everyone. And as always, I will send Evelyn this in PDF format so that you will have all the information, all of the links and everything, so you don't have to stress about note taking. So I always like to start with a little bit of my background, just so you know who the heck is talking to me right now. And so this is just when I was practicing clinically. I have worked with mental health, substance abuse. I've worked with adults, but my focus has been older adults, worked with mandated and voluntary clients. And then you can see the different locations on here. I've worked in mental health hospitals for inpatient, outpatient, etc. And then I also have worked with the Area Agency on Aging. They had contracted me where I was counseling caregivers as well. I also like to share my personal background. My dad was diagnosed with dementia. I'm horrible with time, years back, and my parents moved in with us. It became too much for my mom, and they moved in with us. It'll be 2 years this October. So I'm seeing besides the academic, intellectual side of it, I'm now seeing the personal side of it, and it has really created this empathy that I didn't even know I still had deep in me for this topic. This just talks about the objectives. We're going to talk about myths and stigmas that are associated with Alzheimer's disease, dementia. And we're going to talk about how this affects the caregiver and the person with dementia, and then how you can accept help along the way, because that seems to be a challenge for many of accepting help from others. I will use Alzheimer's and dementia interchangeably, but really this fits for any type of dementia. I love to start with numbers. It's almost repetition every time I present, because again, you don't have to memorize the numbers. It's the impact and why it's so important on what we're talking about. The latest statistic that I found from the Alzheimer's Association is that 6.7 million Americans age 65 and over are living with Alzheimer's disease. Currently, that's 1 in 9 people age 65 and over. So that's 6.7 million. By 2050, it's 12.7 million. And a fourth of dementia caregivers are what we call the sandwich generation. So they're taking care of an older loved one, and they're taking care of someone under the age of 18 in their home as well. And then this was a statistic that I found, I don't know, maybe in the last few months. Of the 6.7 million Americans age 65 and over with Alzheimer's in the US, 4.1 million are women and 2.6 million are men. Why, you ask? This is the only answer I could find from the Alzheimer's Association. First of all, it's the survival difference. Women do live longer, and we know that increasing age is the #1 risk factor for Alzheimer's. But when you look at the research that has been done on this topic, there's a lot of mixed reasons why. But then if you even break it down to in the United States research, they found there's really nothing they can pinpoint to say why more women versus more men as far as risk factors, besides living longer. They couldn't really differentiate any other reason. And then, we're not all in Texas, so we don't have to worry about that. I'm in Texas. I love this. This says, it's a poem on living with dementia. It says, "My eyes do see, my ears do hear. I'm still me, so let's be clear. My memory may fade, my walk may slow. I am me inside, don't let me go. And we also know that of all the dementias, Alzheimer's is the most common, where it's estimated between 60 to 80% of all cases, which is why that's the one we talk about the most. So I wanted to start this with, what is the person living with dementia feeling? We know that they have lots of feelings. These are some of the top feelings that they are going through. Especially early on, there can be some denial of what's happening. And then there can be some anger. Why me? Why is this happening? And then so much embarrassment, which comes because of stigma, which we'll talk about in a minute. Oftentimes depression, especially when someone's diagnosed, depression is higher in the early and middle stages of the disease. Anxiety, many of them feel alone. Even though we have 6.7 million Americans diagnosed, it's, to them, it's personal. They feel like they're alone. Many of them feel like they're a burden. Sometimes when they get further along in the disease, they may just kind of be a little indifferent. But then during this whole process, there can be times where they're content, and they can still find times of happiness and joy. When I started thinking of the caregiver, what I've noticed, they're going through all of these same feelings as the caregiver. The denial this is happening to their loved one, angry this is happening to their loved one. What about the plans I had with this person? Embarrassment, again, back to that stigma, even though it's no one's fault. And then a lot of times with that anger can become the depression and anxiety. And we know so many caregivers feel alone. Again, even though we have so many caregivers out there. And then a lot of times the caregivers feel like they're a burden and they won't ask others for help. Sometimes that depression can turn to indifference. And then also during this process of caregiving, there can be those times of contentment, joy, and happiness. And so they're going through many of the same feelings, just from a different perspective. There are so many myths out there about dementia. These are just some of the top ones. And I think it's really good if you are a caregiver, if you are in the early stages living with dementia, or if you're a professional and you want to explain this to others. We need to be able to articulate these myths to others, because then it helps us educate them. So the number one myth is only older people have dementia. We know that's not true. We have early onset that can happen in as young as the 40s, maybe even 30s, I'm not sure, but earlier, before age 65. There's also this myth that if you have dementia, you will be violent. Other myths out there that many people believe is nothing can be done, so there's no point in really finding any help and learning anything about the disease. Another myth is that people with dementia no longer can enjoy themselves in life. A lot of times people believe that memory loss always equals dementia. We know that's not true. That's why we say if you're noticing some changes, get to the doctor, get all those tests run, because dementia diagnosis is of last resort. They want to see if there's many other things going on. This one right here, dementia is a normal part of the aging process. It's the top myth, and we know that's not true. It's not, quote, normal part of aging. Another myth is if someone in your family has dementia, that you will for sure get it. Your risk does increase, but it does not guarantee that you will. Another myth out there, people with dementia don't understand what's going on around them. Oh, they can, no matter how far along they get into the disease process, we know they can still feel, and that their feelings are powerful, even if they don't understand the words. Another myth is that there are no treatment options for dementia. We know there are many medicines out there to help with symptoms. And we know the FDA is working on a bunch of other treatments as well, but we're not going to get into that today. Another myth is that dementia means the end of a meaningful life, and that's not true. We can still find meaning with the person with dementia at every stage. We have to change our perspective on what that looks like. Another myth out there is that dementia just means memory loss. Well, there's so many other parts to dementia as well. And another myth is you can't really communicate with someone who has dementia. And I spoke to this earlier. Even if they're not understanding words, they can tell your body language, your tone, if you're getting aggravated with them. And then the last one, Alzheimer's and dementia are the same thing. We know dementia is this general term. It's often called an umbrella term. It's a set of symptoms. There's different types. And Alzheimer's, like we said, is the most common, 60 to 80% of cases. So those are the top myths that are out there that we need to educate society about. So stigma and stereotypes. So stereotypes toward older adults are really saying that it's unusual if an older person is not cognitively impaired. And we say things like, oh, she's so sharp for her age. She still has all her marbles. And we are being well-meaning. But again, what we are saying is that that's not normal. And so, and myself included, we have to really be careful of the language that we use. This is, when I was researching this topic, I found some interesting definitions I wanted to share with you. There was the sociologist Goffman, and he said when we stigmatize people, we give them this spoiled identity, and we start to see them to be less than human. Think about that. The person, they are being stigmatized because of their age, they're being stigmatized because of their diagnosis, and when they are stigmatized, society starts to see them as less than human. And what this does is this socially discredits them, and society sees the person with dementia as undesirable, and society rejects them and says they're not normal or acceptable. Then later on, theorists Corrigan and Watson, they broke this stigma down even further, and they said, we have what's called public stigma and self-stigma. And they even related it to those with illnesses, including dementia. And so what they said, kind of what it sounds like, public stigma includes society having this preconceived notion about a certain idea or subject, example, aging and dementia. But this public stigma leads to self-stigma. And this is where the person with dementia, they start to believe what this public stigma is saying, this outward negative beliefs, they turn them inward and they absorb that stigma. And this one shocked me, which it shouldn't, but found out when I was reading, there's courtesy stigma, because we don't want to leave out the primary caregiver, oftentimes the spouse. So courtesy stigma is an extension of public stigma. And remember, we talked about that's normally towards the person with dementia that we're discriminating. And now society has also put the term that a lot of times we discriminate towards their significant other, their primary caregiver. And I'll share a prime example. We had this couple has passed, and she's one of my clients that I saw, and she would tell me about how they were, the typical stigma that's out there. She didn't use those terms, but that's what she was verbalizing, and just the embarrassment and not wanting to share. Well, they finally, her and her husband had dementia. They pray about it, and they're like, okay, we're going to open up. They open up at church to their church congregation, thinking, okay, this is where I'm going to get support. And without knowing the terminology, this courtesy stigma was extended to her and her husband. People pulled away. People stopped interacting with them. And why do we do this? Well, in the literature, here's the top reasons. Because society, we see this is a death sentence. There's no cure for Alzheimer's or dementia. And oftentimes we'll say it's a death before death because they're still living, but the death of the brain cells is causing where we're grieving and losing them once. And then when they physically die, we're losing them again. For many people, and you can think of people probably in your life, avoidance is easier, kind of that head in the sand. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to be around it. many people are not educated about Alzheimer's disease or any forms of dementia. And so they have this blanket statement, this blanket view of what once someone has a diagnosis, what they are. And so they don't understand the stages and what it really means. Sadly, this other one is once someone's diagnosed, they're unable to contribute to society. So really, why are they useful? Other people say because they're acting outside the social norms, then that's what creates the stigma. And then sadly, which kind of goes along with the unable to contribute to society, the stigma is out there because some people will believe that they're a burden to society. And so these are the top reasons of why there is stigma out there towards the person with dementia and their significant other. I thought this was interesting. I got it out of the Generations. It's the American Society on Aging produces this newsletter, and they talked about a study. They did a survey of more than 3,000 adults age 40 and over. 62% of them said society does have a negative judgment of people with some type of cognitive decline. But listen to this. This was interesting. Out of their study, remember 3,000 adults, there were only 3 conditions that were rated a higher level of stigma than dementia. That was addiction, 87%, obesity, 85%, and just the blanket statement of mental illness. And so it talked about many adults in the United States believe, of course, that society looks at dementia in a negative light and judges those who have any type of cognitive impairment. And so it really does make someone living with dementia, like I stated earlier, there's lots of stigma and myths about being older. And then you compound that with having the diagnosis of dementia as well. Another study I wanted to bring up, this was research conducted by ARC, and what they said is that 6 in 10 adults believe cognitive decline is inevitable. And they also believe it's a normal part of aging. And about half believe that they're likely to get dementia as they age. So again, it's just exacerbating that negativity and that fear. And like I said, links to everything I have in this PowerPoint, you will have access to read more in depth about it. I thought this was interesting. This was a quote from Stigma from people with dementia and Alzheimer's. These are quotes that they said. And I thought, wow, we actually get to hear exactly what they're feeling. When people say dementia or Alzheimer's, everybody thinks you're going to die. Is that not sad that someone with Alzheimer's said that quote? That breaks my heart. Another quote was, I'm not ashamed of having Alzheimer's. All my neighbors are aware I have a problem and there's no ridicule, no stigma. And so I wish we could get it out of our minds that we've done something that we need to go under the table and hide. Third person said the general public's attitude towards Alzheimer's in some instances is not very nice. In fact, excuse my expression, but I'd have to say it sucks. But it does because we let it. And then this last person, your family, you're looked at differently. Friends provide stigma. My brother has just checked out. There's a lens that focuses immediately on you. I can feel it. It is the little things that affect you the most, at least at this stage. I'll have a link at the end of this PowerPoint where you can read more about this research study and the quotes. Those are the ones that stuck out to me. So this is what research talks about, the effects of stigma for caregivers and the effects of stigma for the person living with the form of dementia. Low self-esteem. Another one, isolation. Isolation kind of leads into the third one, poor mental health, depression. We know isolation is one of the top symptoms and reasons or risk factors for depression. And we know isolation and depression can also lead to suicidal ideation and thoughts. And then all of these, another effect that stigma has is decreased quality of life. Stigma can prevent people from doing the following. Stigma can prevent those for seeking medical treatment because they don't want people to know. They don't want it on their record, their medical record, which then prevents them from receiving an early diagnosis. It also prevents people of living the best quality of life possible because we need to get seen by the doctor, see if there's medicines, get support, all of those things that could happen if we got the diagnosis. It prevents people from making plans for their future. If they're in denial about it or not dealing with it, they're not planning ahead financially, socially, personally, etc. It prevents people from benefiting from available treatments that are out there. It also, stigma prevents people from developing a support system. It also prevents people from participating in clinical trials and really just contributing to the research if they wanted to have that option. There are ways to fight stigma against dementia. First of all, we need to learn the facts about dementia. There are many websites out there. The one I always point people to is ALZ.org. It is so user-friendly. They have videos, they have infographics, they have just so much out there that you can use, and they use it in, I say they don't use the $10 words. They break it down so we understand it. So get the facts about dementia so that you understand and you can educate others when they start to make any type of comment. Don't make assumptions. A common statement we say, those that work with people with Alzheimer's say, once you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person. Yes, there are many things in common, but everyone experiences it differently. And you may have experienced that in your profession or family. Two people have a dementia diagnosis or even Alzheimer's, and it affects them totally different. So we can't assume. Other ways to fight stigma against dementia is to be a friend. Don't run away if someone shares with you that they have a diagnosis or their loved one has a diagnosis. Don't focus on how you feel about it. Instead, try being a friend to them. Another thing is listen to the people who are experiencing the stigma. Give them a voice, give them an outlet. Ask the caregiver, how are you doing today? If we ask that and we ask it in a caring, loving way and we wait for an answer, we just might get it and then we can be that friend. This one, my students always laugh when I say, check yourself, check your attitude. How are we portraying? What words are we using? What body language are we giving if someone is sharing with us? What we need to check ourselves. What's our attitude? Are we laughing at certain things if we see in movies or on TV, yet we're telling people to not increase the stigma? So we really have to check ourselves. Encourage early diagnosis, because you just saw on the previous slide, if we don't deal with it, it prevents someone with so much that could help them not be alone and have a better quality of life. Support your caregiver, and we're going to go into that in just a moment. Stay informed, stay on top, subscribe to newsletters or things like that to stay on top of the disease so you're aware of what's going on if your loved one is diagnosed with it. And then another one to fight stigma is to remember the person inside. It's not, they are more than what they are diagnosed with. Additional things to kind of break down even more is coping. If you're coping with the stigma, be open and direct. Engage others to talk about it. Share your experiences. It's amazing when one person starts to open up that other people can. And sometimes they just might. And I share this with a lot of my presentations is the more we talk about it, the more normalized it becomes, and the more we might be able to talk about it and break that stigma. Again, communicate with facts. We need to be accurate on what we're sharing about so that we're not misleading people. Definitely, when you're coping with stigma, is you need to seek support. You need to stay connected. Coming to programs like this, Also, going to a support group and just knowing that you are not alone. That is key. I always share with clients, with the caregivers too. It's great. You need the book knowledge, but you also need that support group of someone walking alongside you that knows how you're feeling. Don't be discouraged, or should I say, don't let discouragement overtake you. If others are in denial about the disease, that has nothing to do with you. You've shared with them, you've educated them. And then, of course, if you are coping with stigma, be a part of the solution. Raise awareness, advocate, support, etc. I've read this and I just loved it and I wanted to share. It says, the person with dementia is asking society to talk to me. Don't be worried about talking to me. I'm still me. Sadly, a lot of times people talk around the person as if they're not there. Listen to me. Take time to listen and involve me in the conversation. I can still teach you a thing or two. Again, this is what the person with dementia is asking society. Include me. Keep on inviting me out. Friends still mean the world to me. Ask if I need help. If I seem confused, ask if I need help. These little things help me stay independent. We don't want to do what's called learned helplessness, where we take over and start doing everything for them. So if we gently ask them if they need help. Be patient. And we live in such a fast society. This one's hard. I'm guilty of this one, but we have to be patient. The person with dementia is saying, be patient with me, and I'll show you how I can still do things. It just may take me longer than it used to. Another one, ask me about my dementia. Don't be afraid to ask me questions. When you take the time to understand my dementia, I know there's someone on my side. And then this last one, help my caregiver too. Support my partner and others with care for me. My dementia affects them too. I read in an article that, and it's so accurate, dementia is a family diagnosis. It's not just the person, it's not just the caregiver, it affects the entire family. Oh, I loved this. This is a visual, and you'll see there's a curtain on the right, and behind the stage are all these feelings that the caregiver is feeling. This picture is called The Stage, and this is the quote by the person who drew it. I have to do so much behind the scenes for my person with dementia. And you can see all the things that they're feeling: love, guilt, responsibility, lost, exhausted, mood swings, your story day by day. So for those of you that like the visual, I like to add those in these presentations as well. So when you're dealing with stigma, you're probably, and just also being a caregiver, you're probably going to have some caregiver stress. And so if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, I want to encourage you to do something about it, whether that's talk to someone, talk to your doctor, talk to clergy, talk to a friend. These are some of the top things that really we don't want you to have to be dealing with on your own. Denial about the disease and its effects on the person who has it. Are you still living in denial about your loved one that's diagnosed? Anger or frustration that the person with dementia can't do the things they used to be able to. Very common. I have a lot of spouses that go through this and feel frustrated. You've got to talk about it. Don't try to hold it in. Social withdrawal from friends and activities that used to make you feel good. Is the fact of being a caregiver, is the fact of the stigma keeping you from socializing from others. I talked about it earlier. It's not good for your mental health to be isolated. Anxiety about the future and facing another day. A lot of times when you're a caregiver for dementia, you just need to take it moment by moment. Health problems. If you don't address these, your physical and mental health can certainly go down. I do a presentation called The Hidden Patient, where we talk about that. You as the caregiver are the hidden patient. Exhaustion, sleeplessness, This can be by this never-ending list of concerns, irritability. A lot of times depression and anxiety can come out as irritability as well. And then a lot of times you can have lack of concentration. And sadly, depression that breaks your spirit and affects your coping ability. If you're experiencing any of these symptoms, I encourage you really to talk to someone and not just doing nothing. We know caring for a person with dementia can be all-consuming. And caregivers for people with dementia, the research says they report more employment problems, personal stress, mental and physical health problems, lack of sleep, lack of time to do things they enjoy, and more family conflict than non-dementia caregivers. We've talked about this before. You bring all of that baggage from your family and someone gets a diagnosis with dementia, it doesn't erase all the family history. And so really just getting a hold on that and working through those. Caregivers for a person with dementia are twice as likely to have depression. But sadly, some people don't recognize the symptoms of depression, and other people may have a hard time admitting it, because depression is more than crying. A lot of times people think that depression is crying. And so I wanted to touch on that because this goes back to if you're feeling stigmatized and isolated as a caregiver. So there are many symptoms of depression. Here are some of the top ones: feeling sad, empty, hopeless. If you're seeing changes in your eating habits, whether you're eating more to kind of dull the pain or you don't have an appetite at all. Same thing with sleep. Are you oversleeping or not sleeping at all? But if your sleep patterns have changed significantly, it could be a symptom of depression. Are you feeling tired all the time? It's difficult to be motivated really to do anything. Sometimes it's even hard to just get out of bed. That is a huge sign of depression. Another key one is a loss in interest of people or activities, things that you used to love to do, and you don't enjoy them anymore. And sadly, sometimes feeling numb. Sometimes you just feel numb, that indifference, kind of apathetic. Becoming easily agitated or angered, if that's not your normal personality. If it's easily feeling that nothing you do is good enough. If you are increasing your alcohol or drug consumption. Other symptoms of depression are trouble focusing, thinking or planning, kind of that your head is filled with that head fog. Another huge one is if you're starting to neglect your physical well-being and appearance. Again, if you don't have that energy and that motivation, taking that shower, fixing your hair, just putting on clothes can be like so much effort. And thoughts of running away or escaping from the situation. So I bring all this up to, again, if you're feeling some of these, to definitely, I hope that you will get help. And you can usually start out by talking to your primary care physician. Research says men who are caregivers deal with depression differently. This is generally, it talks about that they're less likely to admit depression. A lot of times men will self-treat with alcohol or they'll just dive into their work more. But male caregivers are more likely to and more willing to hire outside help because a lot of times they tend to talk to or confide in. And sadly, many people, not just men, society says this assumption that it's a sign of weakness if you have depression. And so we're here to tell you that it is not. It is definitely strength to get help for it. Women experience depression at a higher rate than men. Women, wives, and daughters provide most of the caregiving. We know in the United States, approximately 12 million women experience clinical depression each year. That's twice the rate of men. But again, you may not be clinically depressed, but you could be experiencing some of the symptoms of it. And there was a study by Mental Health America that many women do not seek treatment as well. Sadly, they're embarrassed or in denial of it as well. So, and it's understandable. Sometimes when you're you're a caregiver and you're dealing with the stigma and the myths that are out there, and you're also caring for someone with dementia, and you start getting depressed, you may hear people say, snap out of it. It's all in your head, or they're still alive. And so they're really kind of downplaying and diminishing what you're going through as if it's not real. And so just hear me say that ignoring those symptoms or denying them will not make them go away. So coping with depression or caregiver stress, here are some things research-based that you can do. You don't have to do them all. Maybe one thing stands out to you. I would encourage you to try that one thing. Learn ways to relax. Music is powerful. Put on music that puts you in a better mood. Excuse me. Deep breathing. There are many. You can Google deep breathing. You can find a video to walk you through it. Stretching, praying. You can get professional help, medication. Even going outside and getting some sunlight and going for a walk can help. Get caregiver support. I mentioned it early on. There's nothing like going to a support group and being supported by others that are walking through what you've been through. Journaling is, research has shown, getting those emotions out. If you don't want people to read what you've written, I've always told clients, tear it up. The healing part is getting it out from your head and your heart onto the paper. Let family and friends help you. Take others up on their offers. Don't say, oh no, I've got it. If they offer, take it. Sometimes you have to educate them to offer, and take time for yourself. But there are so many self-care myths of you caregivers. I don't have time for myself, or I'm fine. I'll focus on myself later. It doesn't help me. It only makes me feel guilty. No one else can care for fill in the blank like I do. Those are some of the top things I've heard over the years. Here are some reasons why it's difficulty asking for help. Some people have a fear of rejection. This was before they became a caregiver. They're like, if I don't ask, I won't get told no. Again, you've got to get through how you need to get past how you feel about it and think about the well-being of the person you're caring for. I hear this one all the time. I don't want to bother them. They have their own lives. Hey, everyone pitches in. We can all keep our lives. Some people are embarrassed. Again, back to that stigma. They have this fear of being judged. I don't want people coming into my home and seeing how I'm caring for them. I don't want people to know. It'll reflect upon me. That courtesy stigma that we talked about earlier. No one else can do it like you do. Okay, it is your loved one, but there are professionals that are trained. There are friends and family that can help you in certain ways. This one, guilt from the person with dementia or Alzheimer's. We talked about the thinking errors, I believe, last time. And one of them is the shoulds of I should do this, I should do that. And so don't let the person with dementia guilt you and saying, don't leave me, you shouldn't go. Everyone needs a break. And then sadly, if you've been caring for someone for a long time, you don't ask for help because you've really lost your identity. You don't know who you are if you're not caring for someone. But get professional help because we want to help you find that identity. You are more than a caregiver, just like the person with dementia is more than their diagnosis. Ask others to become educated about dementia and Alzheimer's. Ask others to stay in touch with you. Ask them to offer a shoulder to lean on. Ask others to engage the person with dementia and you in activities. Remind others and ask them to be patient, to be flexible, and to offer you help with your to-do list. All of us have to-do lists. Ask them to help you with it. Here's you some ideas to help you when you're asking for help. First of all, you need to be realistic. Caregiving is demanding, so asking for help does not make you inadequate or selfish. You need to accept that. Excuse me, like my allergies are kicking in. The second thing you need to do is make that list. Create a list of a variety of tasks that could be done to support you and your loved one. Write out dry cleaning, groceries, cleaning house, driving to the doctor, walking the dog, anything. Write out the list of everything you need. Consider, I love this one, and I try to point this out in a lot of my presentations too. Consider the abilities and the interests of the people that are offering to help. And I always use this, I don't cook. So if my mom said, can you cook for your father? No, but what I can do, I can he loves to get in the car and we can drive to Whataburger because he loves their burgers, or he loves Uno. We play Uno every night. So match the task with the person that you're asking to help you with that will set them up for success. Plan ahead, if we can. Sometimes we can't always plan ahead. This last one's important. Be clear. When you ask for help, be clear. That's why you need that list. So when someone says, can I help you? Let me pull out my list. Here, this is what it is. Don't say I'll get back to you. Have your list and share with them. This is something else that's real important. So say we've broken past the stigma. We've broken past the myth that no one else can care for my loved one. Let's prepare our visitors. Say we have family or friends or church members coming to help. We need to prepare them. We could be used to how the person with dementia is, but they may not have seen them for a long time. So this could appear strange or worrisome to them. So we want to tell them in advance. You can write a letter, an email, a text, a phone call. Tell them they've had significant weight loss or gain. Or tell them now they're walking with a wheelchair, they're relying heavily on a walker. Tell them if they're wearing disposable briefs or dealing with incontinence. Tell them that if they have the inability to do things for themselves. Because you don't want someone coming over and teasing them and saying, go to the bathroom, you get up, why aren't you getting up? Well, maybe they've forgotten what that means to stand up, or they need help. And then you also need to educate them if there are any unpredictable behaviors that your loved one has been showing. If they shout, if they curse, if they start to unbutton their clothes, just prepare them ahead of time. In summary, what can you do to combat stigma and your mood decline? We need to talk about it. You need to share your story. Educate yourself on the disease, educate others on Alzheimer's or dementia, and about caregiver stress, the symptoms we talked about earlier. If you're going through some of those, share those with them. Outreach in the community. We need to get to the places where people go for support, like their church. We need to educate the leaders in the church. Encourage others to participate in dementia simulations. A lot of times communities will offer those. They are wonderful, where you can, some of them are even online. You don't get the full effect with the gear and everything, but you can do the online one. And it helps empathize what someone with dementia is living with. Practice self-care, attend support groups, be open to professional help when needed, accept help and support from family and friends, use social media to increase awareness, use proven coping strategies for stress and depression, like we talked about earlier, journaling, getting help, exercising, things like that. And this is just some research that you can read about more in depth of things you can do. And it's talking about your physical activity, eating properly, taking care of your mental health. We know getting sleep is so important. You cannot be a successful caregiver without getting sleep. And lastly, I want to touch on the caregiver rights. You as caregivers have these rights. And if you're a professional on here, I encourage you to print these off and share them with your clients. You have a right to take care of yourself. It's not selfish. And what it will do is it will enable you to take care of your loved one. You have a right to seek help from others. You have a right to do things that don't include the person with dementia. Basically, you have a right to have a life. You are more than a caregiver. You also have a right, and a lot of times caregivers need to hear this, You have a right to get angry and to get depressed and express those difficult feelings. You need someone to have an outlet with. You have a right to reject any attempt of your relative that if they're trying to manipulate you, guilt you, anger you, etc. You have a right to receive consideration, affection, forgiveness. You have a right to take pride in what you're accomplishing. Applaud yourself. Be proud of what you accomplish each day. You have a right to protect yourself, to make a right, to have a life. And you have a right to expect and demand that new strides are being made in finding resources, etc. And then you can make up your own here as well. Definitely find out support groups. Oh, call your area agency on aging. You can dial 211 and find your local area agency on aging for supports that are out there for caregivers. Remember the Caregiver Bill of Rights. Rely on your family and friends. There's a book called The 36-Hour Day. I think it's in the 7th edition. I always recommend that to someone who's starting out as a caregiver. And then, of course, counseling services are out there as well. Remember, you matter and you are not alone. So any questions or comments?
Wow, what a lot of information. and you can present it like that. Yes, it's so interesting, to hear all of these, not just the effects, but also some of the ways that we can support ourselves. So I would encourage anyone who has questions, especially those of you who maybe have had some of these experiences, please join us and let us know how you experienced them, what you did about them, if that worked for you or not, if you tried something else. We would love to hear that. Love to, and any questions that you might have of our expert presenter here. I know that I have heard so many times that caregivers didn't want to invite their friends or their loved ones' friends into the house because they repeat the same question over and over and over, and the caregiver gets upset, and then the people who are visiting get upset. Can you help us with that one?
Oh, definitely. It comes down to, we have to have patience, and it comes down to educating. And these steps I've given you, do you do them once and everything's perfect? No, it's a process, it's trial and error. And I have had to educate my family so much about my father who has dementia. And so it just takes re-educating to now we're at the point, it's almost 2 years of them living with us. When family comes to visit, they're at a point where they're not making a comment or laughing if he asks, because at first, if they don't really understand the disease, they are retelling the story. So we just answer. And then we also have a little whiteboard where we write things down. So-and-so, this is your nephew. We're going to do this. And so, but it just takes education, persistence. It took persistence with me getting my mother to realize she can be a caregiver and have a life. We had some battles of her doing stuff with friends. And now she, I share this all the time. Now she's like, I'm going out with my friends. So, hurry up, get done. And so it just takes, and, they're working, the person with dementia is working through their emotions. The caregivers are working through their emotions. We're doing the best we can. This is not something that many of them have been through before. So a lot of grace is extended. But I would say persistence, just not to give up.
That's how we're going to cure that stigma. Well,
Definitely.
Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was, since no one else, please folks join in. I'm filling in a little time here, but I had some questions and I wanted to talk about people seeking treatment. What I've heard on so many of these calls over the last 12 or 13 years is that, that list that caregivers make usually has the other person's stuff on the top. So the first things they do is they get the pharmaceutics. They take them to their therapy. They take them to the doctor. So they're doing all these things. And so they get home and they're exhausted. And they don't have time, to do a support group. This is what they're saying to us, we don't have time to seek treatment for ourselves because we're really just trying to do a good job as a caregiver.
I think it goes back to, I had stated, you have many roles in life. Being a caregiver is one role. It's important. It's a huge role, but it's not the only role. And so sometimes the self-care, a lot of times, and myself included, we think the self-care has to be something extravagant. Okay, the self-care can be, Natalie, play Uno with your father for 20 minutes while I go lay down. So it's really just kind of defining what do I need most? And I love that you brought up that point. That to-do list, you do need to put things for you. And so that can be, come spend time with the person so that I can just rest in the other room. And so definitely but because it's like they say on the airplane thing, put the mask on yourself or you're not going to be any good for others. We know that intellectually, but for some reason it translates to our heart. No, I need to keep pushing and doing more. So if you can move past how you feel about that and realize if I take care of myself, I'm going to be better for this person with dementia. It is going to benefit you. That's a hard thing to break, but that's what I had to work through it. My mom had to work through it. That it's okay. It's okay that I have a life. It doesn't mean I'm a bad daughter. And you know what else is not a bad daughter? If I come home at night and I'm too tired to play Uno that night, I'm not a bad daughter. I'm human. And so I think working through your own emotions and feelings, and that is what is so great about going to a professional. It is not your friend. It is not your loved one. It is someone objective that you can talk to. And there's something about hearing that from a professional that it's okay versus, your friend or your family. So I think getting that outside help, but sometimes it's baby steps. Like I said, just that nap for 15 minutes and the little things.
Well, thank you for that. We did have a gentleman on, he might be on here, I'm not sure, who talked about doing a self-care list. So you had not just a to-do list for your loved one, but also doing a self-care list for yourself, the things that
I
would
love that. I love that. And put it in a visible place, maybe your bathroom mirror, and just check off as you're getting those done. It's so important.
And we have a chat. And what it says is, let's see, from one of our members here, like you said, sometimes hearing it from a professional, we take into consideration more than if it comes from a loved one. Boy, that's for sure, especially family.
Oh,
family
okay.
knows nothing.
And I'm Natalie. I'm the baby. So it doesn't matter how many degrees, how many experience, how long I've been working with dementia and Alzheimer's for 20 years. They're not going to listen to me half the time. But if they go to someone else, what I said, and I have to not take that personal. I just want them to get it and implement what they're learning. So yeah, it's human nature. It's definitely human nature to not necessarily listen to your loved ones because you have that history. You have that whole package of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be hard.
The other thing I wanted to remind folks about is that we are doing podcasts here, and the hidden patient presentation that you gave about caregivers is one of those podcasts. So if somebody wants to go back and listen to that, if they're feeling like this really resonates with some stuff that's going on with them, I would really encourage you to do that. We can send you a link if you need it. You can call our customer service representative. And with that, I am going to do a little bit more housekeeping because I want you all to know that the resources and the slides that you are going to get with your post-session questionnaire won't come to you unless you're registered. So if you haven't registered, if you got the number or the link from somebody else, please call our customer service representative, who you can call for many things because she's so smart. Her number is 866-390-6491. That's 866-390-6491. You'll also get the monthly calendar, which is just a look at all of the different things that are going to happen during the month in the presentations. And these are the WillMed does such a beautiful job of getting experts who research, who care, who know exactly the topic that they're talking about. And some of those upcoming sessions we have. Okay, now I'm doing one next Tuesday. I'm not an expert in neuroscience, but I've been doing a lot of reading. And I find the whole neuroscience thing extremely exciting. I personally think it's better than AI. I think it's more exciting than AI. So please chime in. I mean, please come in to watch that one. That should be fun. I think it'll be a really fun presentation. And then Thursday on August 24th, we are moving away from the idea of codependency with Dr. Jamie Heisman. And Dr. Jamie Heisman has done a really good job of kind of setting us up for this one, because he's talked about how to deal with toxic people, how to take your life back, and dealing with codependency is a big part of that. Also on Tuesday, August 29th, what to know about the new treatment for Alzheimer's disease with Dr. Elliot Montgomery Sklar and our dear Lucy. So we have those things going on. And with that, I would like to thank all of the caregivers so much who are still on here, and for those who left, for what you do every day and the hard work, brilliant work, and take care of yourselves, please. And that's really the message here. And
definitely.
Yes, and I want to thank you, Dr. Oliver. You always do a beautiful job.
Thank you.
My
Thank
head
you.
swims with all the information that you give us. So thank goodness we get your presentation.
I know, I get excited. I want you to know everything that I've discovered out there in the research. It is overwhelming, but yes, you'll have all the links to everything. So,
well, thank you so much for that. And I also want to thank the WillMed Charitable Foundation, because of getting these expert presenters, setting everything up, getting the monthly calendar out, doing the podcast. It is actually a real piece of work that's all based on what caregivers need. So I want to thank WillMed Charitable Foundation too. And with that, I am going to stop the recording, and thank you all so much, for joining us today, and hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye now.
bye. Thank y'all so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.